Hello, for those of you that might not know me, my name's Deborah Banks and I'm the Deputy Head here at Bradfield. And if you're watching this video, then in all likelihood you have a son or a daughter in Year 11. In a normal year, then we would invite you in as parents and carers to talk with you about some of the ways that you can support your child revising at home for Year 11 and exams in summer. But obviously this isn't a normal year, to say the least, and COVID-19 is obviously dominating lots of people's thoughts and feelings at this time. There are lots of things that we do know about COVID-19, and one of those, unfortunately, is that it is here for the foreseeable future and that we have to work collectively to support our young people, particularly in Year 11, through that year. There are lots of unknowns, but what we do know is that we have got a very clear plan in place to support your children during this academic year, whatever each week may bring. Some of the unknowns are in terms of if there will be any changes to the exam season this academic year. What DFE and Ofqual have done thus far is that they have made changes, often to do with a reduction in content of the majority, though not all, of the GCSEs for the summer series. The unknowns as of yet as to when that summer series will take place. And of course whether or not centre assessed grades will form part of that summer landscape. We are operating on the expectation that the summer series will go ahead as it is currently planned. In other words, that children will sit their GCSEs. And so what I want to use this presentation to do with you is to talk through how you as parents and carers can support your child in readiness for those exams in summer. First and foremost, what you need to know is that whether your child is off school for a short amount of time, whether there is a local lockdown or the collapsing of a bubble within school, the work that your child will be able to access will be on their student SharePoint. And I emailed all Year 11 students a presentation to show them how to do that on Friday, the 25th of September. Your child needs to have their student school email and username and password, and that's all they need to be able to access that. And please contact your form tutor in the first instance if you're having difficulties there. Always in Year 11, students do best when home and school are working in partnership with one another, and that will be definitely the case this academic year. The biggest thing that you can be doing for your child if they are working from home, as Year 11s currently are at the time of this recording, is to get them into a routine. That's the thing that we can't do to support you at home. We can talk to the student, we can talk to them over the phone, we can do all we can remotely, but it's parents and carers that need to try to get them into that routine with whatever carrot and stick you know works with your particular child. Similarly, when students are in school, getting them into a routine with their revision is also absolutely key. And what this presentation will take through for you is some of those things that you can do to support your child, whether they're doing their schoolwork at home or whether they are doing their revision at home. So I do hope that you're going to find it of some use. Now, these are some of the things that I would say in a normal school year for Year 11s, and they're certainly absolutely the case now. How can you as a parent and carer do all you can to combat the normal natural stresses that Year 11s go through from becoming something that's overwhelming? So there are some things on the screen there that I would particularly emphasise. I would keep talking to your young person at home about not chasing perfection in either schoolwork or in homework. Neither do they have to think that everything has got to be right right now in September, October time. It's the job of us as teachers to be looking at what your children are producing for us in school, first and foremost in the assessment weeks beginning Tuesday the 6th of October, to look at what they don't know and to plan how we're going to support them to improve. So everything you can do as a parent or carer to get them to see that work where they make mistakes is a good thing, because it helps them and their teachers to plan how they're going to improve. Similarly, encourage your child to absolutely therefore embrace that idea that mistakes are human, that even if they're chasing levels 8s and levels 9s in their summer exams, no exam board requires 100%. So there's going to be that margin of error even in those level 9 kinds of grades. And to try to refocus and reframe. If I make a mistake, if I get something wrong, that's a positive. It's a learning experience. I learn from my mistakes, and with my teacher's support, I get better as I go along. And to focus on those tiny improvements, one step at a time, rather than the bigger picture. So a good learner there, as you can see on the screen, is one who's in control of their learning, who focuses on taking those tiny steps, who monitors that they're getting better, is strategic about planning out what are they going to do when. But you can only be an effective learner if you've got that knowledge, that you've got ready access to, that you're unlocking things that went into your short-term working memory during the lesson into your longer-term memory through that process of revision. And what the next stage of this presentation is going to do is to just share with you, as parents and carers, some of the things that we try to instill and teach at school about those learning and revision habits. So the biggest thing that students can do with their revision is what we call retrieval practice, and that's exactly as it says on the tin really. You're doing an activity that is designed to try to make you bring to the forefront of your mind something that you learned the previous lesson, the previous week, the previous half term, so on and so forth. Flashcards here are really, really useful for students to be able to do that. If they look at what they've done in their lesson, if they pull out keywords, if they pull out key questions, and on one side of the flashcard they've got the keyword or the key question, and on the reverse they've got the answer. And this is a really useful thing that you as parents and carers can help with in terms of flashcards, that your child can give you the flashcards that they've made. You as a parent and carer can test them, and then you can build them up into 2 or 3 piles of flashcards. The ones that they know, the ones that they knew with a little bit of prompting, and the ones that they'd completely forgotten. And the idea of retrieval practice is the more that you practice retrieving that information, the more you are taking that information from having been in your short-term working memory into your longer term. So that use of flashcards at home is something that's really useful. It's not useful if all the child does is to make lots of flashcards and not actually use them. It's the using them to test themselves that's absolutely the most useful thing. This is something that we are doing in our lessons a lot of the time. We might start off a lesson asking them to answer questions that relate to work that they've done in previous lessons, and that's the reason that we would do that in school. Another key thing that's a useful revision tool is to get them to elaborate on what they can remember. One really useful way of doing that is to get them to create mind maps on particular topics that get them to connect together key ideas. And if you as parents and carers are wanting to support them here, you can question them on the why. You can question them on why have you linked this and this in your mind map together, so that they really have to explain that thinking process. So dual coding is another strategy that some teachers use. It's one that I use myself quite a lot with my year 11s, and it's as simple as this. It's getting them to kind of read the information that they're trying to learn, to break it down and to try to represent small bits of it with a picture or a symbol or a series of pictures and symbols. And again, it's another way of retrieving information. What I do with my year 11s, for instance, with the plot of Macbeth, is that we have each bit of the plot is represented by a particular symbol, and then we cover up the plot details and we use the symbols to try to test whether they can recall the plot. So this is a really good thing to do, and again, you as parents and carers can help with this if you get them to show you something that they might have dual coded, or you encourage them on their flashcards, for instance, to have little symbols or little pictures on there that jog their memory, and then you can use the pictures or symbols to test whether or not they can recall the knowledge that they're trying to remember. So I think you can probably see the theme here, really, that revision, the kind of key to revision is that regular revisiting of information. That's why flashcards can be a really fantastic thing. If you've got your pile that you've remembered, your pile you haven't remembered, you're going to focus on the ones you've not remembered the most, but keep coming back to the ones that you remembered easily every so often. So when they're planning their revision schedules, they want to build in that repetition of revisiting key ideas. So this is how we are trying to help students within school. We are explicitly teaching them how to use some of these revision and learning techniques, both during lessons, and we have a plan of doing this during form time sessions too. It's really important that they make sure that their notes are revision friendly, that they're making in the lessons. Wherever possible, we are providing them with photocopies or textbooks so that they're not having to rely just on their own notes, and that maximises the time that they are in class. But where they are writing themselves, to make sure that they can read what they have written, that things are nicely, clearly labelled, so that they are making sense to their future selves when they're looking back at them. We will make sure in class time that we are giving them some time to be able to focus in class, to revise in class. We will be doing that less this year than we might have done in previous years, because obviously we want to maximise the actual teaching time within the lessons. However, because we're in the process of putting all of our lessons onto Student SharePoint, that also means that students can access these themselves at home and spend some time using those revision techniques that I've already talked about. And we will always, when we are getting them to revise and we're setting that as a discrete piece of work, make sure that they've got a specific task to do, rather than just telling them to go away and revise. We will give them something explicit to do that will be a revision activity. Now, you know your child best, and you know whether or not you have got a child who is likely to only be able to concentrate for 10 minutes before their mind flits to somewhere else, or a child who might potentially work for hours and hours and hours. For both of those, we would say that the ideal is somewhere in the middle, that what students are doing when they're at home and when they're at school is they are studying for short periods of time and then switching to another subject. So whether your child finds it difficult to concentrate or whether they could concentrate for hours and hours and hours, the approach is still the same. Trying to get them to revise in shorter chunks so that that's enabling them to kind of revisit areas more regularly. So a typical session, for instance, might be doing 25 minutes of their Macbeth English revision and then stopping, having a short rest, and then moving on to doing something from their maths teacher or their history teacher. When they've done that, stop, have a short rest, and then perhaps revisit what they did in their English session to see how much they have recalled. So continual short pieces of revision are much better than either just 5 more minutes here and there, or working for hours and hours and hours without a break, when you are going to become tireder and therefore you're going to be less effective as a learner and a reviser. So there are things that you can make sure that you are doing to help with that at home. We would be saying that if they are not in school for any period of time, that the students are working for 5 hours during the course of the day to replicate the 5 sessions that they would have had in school. In addition to that, we would also be expecting them to be working, I usually give a ballpark figure of at least 10 hours a week outside their normal school routine to be devoting towards their revision. So helping them to plan what their week looks like is something that you can do in a very concrete way as a parent and carer at home. Get them to think about the sense of their whole week. Think about where there are, for them, non-negotiables. What's the thing that they might still want to be doing in their social time in a socially distanced way nonetheless? When are they more tired during the course of the week? When have they got more energy? When can they work at the weekends? Do they want to keep a particular part of the weekend free, or do they want to work regularly? Whatever they're doing, there are the things there to encourage your child to do, to work in small chunks, to have regular breaks, to alternate between the subjects when they're revising, and certainly to build in those little mini tests of what they've been doing to see what they can recall, and that's where you as parents and carers can come in there to help them. We would massively recommend that they move from themselves anything that might distract them. We appreciate that they are accessing their work on from SharePoint from a screen, but kind of minimising the things that they don't need to have in front of them. The Xbox, the phone, if they're not using their phone to work from, we would hugely recommend. Things to encourage them not to do is to work in huge great periods without a break. Even the most dedicated of students, they're going to work better if they've got that element of self-care. We'd also recommend them not sticking to one subject over a great period of time, but breaking that up. And as I've already said, encourage them not to be procrastinating by going on social media or multitasking. And definitely for those very conscientious students that might otherwise have done that, we would not recommend that they're working 7 days a week. They need to build in time for some self-care and some relaxation. And that's a key thing that you can be sharing that message with them and insisting upon that. So on that basis, thinking about kind of building up their revision, you as a parent and carer know your child best and know where you need to step in to kind of help out with self-care really. We would hugely encourage all of the way through year 11 that they're building in periods of time during the week where they do something completely different from schoolwork. We know that our most conscientious, stereotyping slightly, it's often girls who are high ability, but it can be all genders and all abilities. You can have those students that feel that the way to get through is to work 24/7, and that's almost as dangerous really as not working at all. Get them to kind of structure some physical activity every day as far as is possible with COVID guidelines. Definitely try to ensure that they've got a good sleep routine, and we would massively recommend them not having devices in the room. If you can bear to, as parents and carers, at key points in the year, look at the chores that you might be assigning them to do at home, looking at your expectations of how they keep their bedroom, and just considering whether there are some things where you could cut them a little break from time to time and maybe let some things slide. If students do have part-time jobs, they are of course going to want to keep those up and running, but again, for you as parent and carers to kind of keep reviewing that and managing whether the balance is right for them. So the final part of this presentation is just to make you aware of some of those free self-care apps that you might point your child in the direction of. So meditation apps, and there are 2 on there that are free. We would always recommend you look very carefully at any terms and conditions and any data that might be required to use those apps. But for students who kind of struggle with just having minds that are racing, that they find it hard to focus, they find it hard to switch off, we'd hugely recommend any of the meditation apps that are available. I myself have used the Headspace one quite a lot and would hugely recommend it. Similarly, there are lots of apps on the NHS website that we would recommend that fall into that same kind of category. This one in particular is about trying to do what I mentioned earlier in this presentation, take kind of negatives and reframe them as positives. As we said with work, if you get something wrong, reframing that as a positive, now you know the thing that you don't know and you can do something about that, working with your teacher to improve it. So there's just one there recommended from the NHS website. I did say we recommend just one from NHS, but actually when you go on and you have a look, they've got lots and lots of things that are absolutely free. No app, I don't think you need to be downloading any app that you pay for. The NHS have got a plethora of things that might be useful to direct your child or to explore with your child together. Lots of our students often talk about the fact that they find it really hard to switch off. Headspace do a variation of their app that is about going to sleep, and similarly the NHS do this one, the PZIZ one, that does a similar kind of thing. Encouraging your child to actually be doing something about their sleep patterns is really important. I've already talked earlier about looking at their bedroom, making it a place that is minimised in terms of distractions and devices, and doing all of you can there. But it might be that before they actually go to bed, actually working through an app that kind of calms them and gets them in the kind of right frame of mind to be switching off might be something you'd like to explore. So I hope that's given you some things to help you and to think about at home to support your young person through year 11. Rest assured, as always, we will do all that we can to be supporting your child through what would ordinarily be a very tricky year for them, and things are obviously complicated by the COVID situation this year. If you were just taking a couple of takeaways from this, they would be the following. Number one, make sure your child has got access to their school email and contact us if that isn't the case, because that way they'll be able to access all of the resources throughout the year and be able to revisit them at home throughout the year as well at their leisure. I would support them in building in a good routine, crucial for when they are working at home if there are any further kind of mini bubble lockdowns, local lockdowns or national lockdowns, but also crucial in terms of them working from home to build up that revision routine. And finally, the third takeaway is to please make sure that you continue to contact us, form tutors in the first instance, about anything that we can do to support you, to support your child at home. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found it of some use.